Hello, welcome to another episode of Set Musings. So we're up to Darksteel, which is part of the original Mirrored block, second set. It's a small set, 165 cards. So again, we've got that rarity or symmetrical rarity in the set. So 55 commons, 55 uncommons, 55 rares. It's in, like I said, the Mirrored block, so we've got artifact themes, equipment. In this set, we'll see several indestructible cards, what's called pulses, affinity for artifacts and basic land types. Entwine is in this particular set, as is modular. So as with episodes up till now, again, I'm going to slice and dice the set, slice through with some of those keywords, abilities, slice through in terms of the cycles, and slice through in terms of the different card types. And once we've done all that, then that'll be our set musings for this episode. So let's have a look. So I've sort of also subdivided the whole artifact thing up a little bit so we can get a bit of a grasp on this. So here's the whole 165 cards we have in the set. And as we scroll through, again, I've made the artwork super big because Scryfall has excellent scans for these. And just to get a feel for the artwork, but also the rough breakdown. So what we'll notice is, because it's a heavy artifact set, you're going to see slightly less cards in a particular colour, and more cards that are colourless. But that's not to say they don't have a colour activation cost. Also notice here, we've still got that washed out look to the coloured mana when it's inside of the rules text. And that's a thing that went away eventually, and we'll see which set that they go back to reintroducing, like the coloured background to the mana symbols in this rules text area. So the reason why I point it out is sometimes when we're talking about coloured activation costs, it can be difficult to differentiate on first look. You have to sort of sometimes look really hard. You can see we've got some pretty interesting equipment here. Oh yeah, really like the artwork for this one. This has been reprinted a few times now. But just to have a quick look. Whoa, what did I do there? That's better. You can see this would be the original down here, and I suppose when I first became aware of it would be 10th edition, and then it was reprinted in M10 again, and you can see it's been reprinted in various core sets, actually a couple there, but they switched to this other artwork. So when I say reprinted, if you look at the reprint history, it's like Darksteel 3 times in core sets, and then in multiplayer stuff. So Plane Chase, Commander 2016, Plane Chase Anthology, because it was in one of these decks, and then one of these decks, and then also in the Mystery Booster. And you can see it sort of holds this price around about what, $2 to $3 maybe, well, $2 to $4 maybe, depending on what version you have. we'll come on to these as well. And we got a few non-basic lands in the set as well. So some interesting stuff. Oh, did you see? Just went by their Skull Clamp, and that as well. So yeah, a bit of a price to it, and it's printed in Darksteel with this artwork, and then well, it was in this particular commander here. We've got the new style artwork, but for 2011 they were still using that original artwork. So yeah, mainly basically been reprinted in Commander, nowhere else. I'm assuming it just caused too much trouble if you reprinted it in Standard. So anyway, so let's start looking at some of the different angles of this. So we've got 73 cards, just to show you the sort of art that have artifacts somewhere in the type. So these could be straight artifacts, artifact creatures. That's pretty complicated. You've got an artifact creature wizard legend, but also within all of this you have equipment as well. There we go. So now the main set, the large set, the first set of the block, had most of the artifact equipment. Oh, sorry, artifact land. But there is one in here, Darksteel Citadel. So let's slice that up a bit more. So what we'll do, if we were to take out all of the artifact creatures, so with all the artifacts, there's 73 artifacts in the set, regardless of what subtypes they are. If you take out the creature as a type or subtype, I suppose well, how do you think about that? They're both types, aren't they? And so that just leaves you the non-creature artifacts. So artifact and equipment and artifact land, we have 42 cards. While we're on the subject of equipment, there's 12 within the artifacts. There's 12 pieces of equipment. So I mentioned about excuse me, indestructible being a thing, and so we have 11 cards in the set which have indestructible on them somewhere, of which a couple are actually at common. So yeah, you wouldn't have to open many packs before you saw that as a theme. Affinity, as I've mentioned, is in the set, 8 cards. So with Affinity, I just assumed everybody was familiar with Indestructible. So Indestructible destroy effects and lethal damage don't destroy it. There are other ways of removing indestructible creatures. You just can't do it through targeted destruction. Well, anything that basically says destroy, or lethal damage. Now, sack effects will get rid of indestructible. I don't think, let me just click on this and find out. Yeah, you can see here there's been no change to any of this in terms of the Oracle text. But I'll include a link here, and you can you know, I'm being a bit hesitant about how I define indestructible beyond this, because it's one of those things that again is useful to understand in Magic. And in the link article to Darksteel, there is a link in there as well to indestructible. So yeah, if you're interested in, you know, how you can remove indestructible items, then yeah, there's information within MTG Wiki. Okay, so back to Affinity. So not a ton of Affinity cards, 8 cards. Affinity for artifacts, where basically it's always this spell cost 1 less to cast for each artifact you control. And we'll see in a moment, there is a cycle in here. We've got Entwine. So for Entwine, you can cast the card for its regular cost. If you do that, it acts like a regular modal spell. So you get to choose what you want the spell to do. And you can see most of these are instants. We've got one sorcery. So Reap and Sow, you can destroy a target land, or you can search your library for a land card, put that card into play, then shuffle your library. Now, what you can then do is to pay the Entwine cost. So if you pay that Entwine cost on top of the casting cost, you get to basically have both of these. Also notice Savage Beating has a conditional on it, which is you can only play it only during your turn and only during combat. So it is instant speed, but it can only be played on your turn and during combat. So it's fairly selective. Modular. So this is a new thing. So with modular, it comes into play with 3 +1/+1 counters on it. When it's put into a graveyard, you may put its +1/+1 counters on target artifact creature. So you can move the counters around when the creature which has these counters on it dies. And you can see there's a number here with modular. We've got 11. And you can see there's a whole number of these arc bound. And in fact, they're all arc bound. Some are at uncommon, some at common, and some at rare. Sometimes I make a mistake here, so I've got this in twice. Yeah. So let's move on to the cycles now. Affinity Golems or Affinity Golems. And there are 5 of those. It's a cycle. So Affinity for swamps, mountains, plains, islands and forests. So as we've seen already, the spell costs 1 less to play for each forest you control. Additionally, a number of these have extra stuff on them. So this one, so what you do is you know, if you want to know what particular colour these are in the cycle, just look at the particular land that they have affinity for. So with the black one, that also has fear on it. The red one has haste. The white one has, oh god, my brain's gone blank. Attacking does not, what's that referred to? Oh dear me. Vigilance, that's it. Vigilance is on the tip of my tongue. The blue one has flying, and the green one, oh, nothing. And there's, you know, some variability in the casting cost, and certainly some variability in the power toughness. This costs more than I think all the others, yeah, but higher power toughness. we have the echoing spells. So they affect all chosen cards with the same name. So Echoing Calm, destroy target enchantment and all other enchantments with the same name as that enchantment. Echoing Truth is non-land permanents. Echoing Decay is creatures and creatures with the same name. Echoing Ruin is artifacts. And finally, the green one, Echoing Courage, target creature and all other creatures with the same name as that creature get +2/+2 until end of turn. So interestingly, was it 4 out of the 5 act as removal of some description, or this one destroys enchantments, this one bounces back to person's hand. This one gives it -2/-2, so we'll get rid of it. You know, if it's 2 power, toughness or less, or 2 toughness or less, should I say? Artifact, but this one actually is a pump spell. So interesting. Oh, these things, yeah, the lucky charms. So I know these from 10th edition. So they're all the same in terms of the casting cost. The effect of the life gain effect is the same. It's all 1 life, but it's triggered whenever you play in the Angel's Feather a white spell, Demon's Horn a black spell, Dragon's Claw a red, Kraken's Eye a blue, and Worm's Tooth is green. Pulses. So they're all pulse of the something. So pulse of the fields. Are these? Yeah, they're instants and sorceries. They're all 1 and then 2 of the appropriate colour. And they provide a resource. They return to their owner's hand as long as it meets the condition. So, Pulse of the Fields, you gain 4 life. Then if an opponent has more life than you, return Pulse of the Fields to its owner's hand. Draw 2 cards, this is Pulse of the Grid. Then discard a card from your hand. Then if an opponent has more cards in hand than you, return it, Pulse of the Grid to your hand. With Pulse of the Dross, we've got hand disruption here, and again you get to return it to your hand. If that player has more cards in hand after that happens, Pulse the Forge 4 damage to target player. If that player has more life than you, then return it to the hand. And then Pulse of the Tangle puts a token in play, and if the opponent controls more creatures than you, then you bounce it back to your hand. So I suppose you could call them leveling type effects, where they'll basically carry on working, or they're usable until such a point as you level up to your opponent. So that's in terms of the regular horizontal cycles. We've got this mega cycle. I brought this up before, and I'll probably do it for all the sets in this block because it does affect them all. And this is the Cauldron mega cycle. So we've already seen Sword of Cauldron it's in Mirrodin. Shield of Cauldron is the one from this set from Darksteel, and then Helm of Cauldron is the one from Fifth Dawn. We've also got this Cauldron Complete, which I've just put here for you know, I was going to say completeness, but just to show you. So this was in Modern Horizons 2. So equipped creature gets +5/+5 and has first strike, trample, indestructible haste, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a creature, exile that creature. So, it's a living weapon. interesting enough. So it goes into play with a germ token on it. So what you'll notice is obviously, yeah, all the abilities here are reflected in this, I believe. Although it doesn't do this last bit, does it? Interesting. I suppose in and of itself, it, well, yeah, have the advantage here of this being a 4/4 colourless avatar legend creature. Yeah, anyway. So, pair here, Emissary of Hope, Emissary of Despair. So we've got a mirrored pair basically. They both cost 1 and then 2 in the appropriate colour. They're 2/1. They're illustrated by the same artist, and they have an effect of either gaining or losing life relative to the number of artifacts that another player controls. So we'll start looking at some types here. Obviously we've already had a look at artifacts, so I'm not going to repeat that. So these are our creatures in here, so 71 creature cards, of which, of course, some of them are artifact creatures. And this, just to show you, is so there's 40 creatures that aren't artifacts. Yeah. Chittering Rats was in the set. And we've got a news. You can see that goblins are fairly well represented in, although there's only, well, there's two goblins there that are common. It's always interesting to see with creatures what particular tribes show up in common. Like when you're thinking about sets that are, when you're drafting or playing limited. These are our instants, 31 instants. So we'll have a look and see. So we got enchantment destruction, artifact tap down, life gain, artifact destruction or black creature, that's a fog type effect. It's counterspell, it's a speed counterspell there in blue. Artifact bounce, another counterspell. Okay, what do we like for black instant speed removal? There's life drain. We saw this card before, so that'll remove a target creature and anything else with the same name when it's toughness of 2 or less. So this is our destruction spell. 5 and a black. Destroy target non-black creature. It can't be regenerated. You gain control of all equipment that was attached to it. That's an interesting spell. So what have we got in terms of red direct damage? So there's a conditional 2 damage single red spell. Inflame deals 2 damage to each creature dealt damage this turn. We've got another spell which is modal here, so 2 in a red for either 3 damage to target creature or 3 damage to target player. We can entwine those. It's double strike, target redirection, equipment destruction, stuff that pumps our power. And then in green we've got the Echoing Courage, which is that slight variant on a pump spell where it targets all other creatures with the same name as well as the target creature. Life gain, artifact destruction, and this is interesting. If you remember, there's is it modular? So it's good to have cards that can play around with counters. Sorcery speed stuff. There's 16 of those. There's only a couple in white. Soul Scale, which will destroy all non-artifact permanents. Single blue sorcery. So we've got conditional tutoring for artifacts. Oh, there's a way of dealing with tokens and counters. Okay, that's interesting. That's really going to hose any arc-bound stuff. Oh, Death Cloud's in here. How many times has that been reprinted? Oh, it was only in Modern Masters. Essence Drain, Pulse of the Dross, which we've seen. Scrounge. Oh yeah, this is what I was going to say. Is Fireball's in here. Fireball does X damage divided evenly rounded down among any number of target creatures and or players. As an additional cost to cast Fireball, pay one for each target beyond the first. So, previously seen in 5th edition, it was first printed in Alpha. Got Flame Break, so interesting to see what they've got like sorcery speed wise in terms of direct damage. 3 damage to each creature without flying and each player. Creatures dealt damage this way can't be regenerated, but you're heavily invested in red there. This one we've seen already. This one as well. Oh. We can bounce artifacts. Only 3 enchantments in the set. Here's our non-basic land. So we've got Blink Moth Nexus. So tap, add colourless to your mana pool. For 1, you can turn Blink Moth Nexus becomes a 1/1 Blink Moth artifact creature with flying until end of turn. It's still a land. And 1 and tap, target Blink Moth gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Darksteel Citadel, which was the indestructible land, adds a colourless mana to your mana pool. And Meridian's Core also adds colourless to your mana pool. Put a charge counter on Meridian's Core. Remove a charge counter from Meridian's Core. Add 1 mana of any colour to your mana pool. So they all generate colourless mana, but this is the only one that will generate other sorts of mana. That was a utility land. can turn into a creature, and this one is indestructible. And of course, no set musings will be complete without a look at the legendaries. So 3 legendaries, although only 2 of them are creatures. We've got Slow Bad, Goblin Tinkerer, so 1 and a red creature, Goblin Artificer, Artificer Legend. Sacrifice an artifact, target artifact becomes indestructible until end of turn. We've got Memnarch, 7 to cast, but it's a blue commander because it has blue activation cost, so its colour identity would be blue here. And 1 and 2 blue, target permanent becomes an artifact in addition to its other types. 3 and a blue, gain control of target artifact, and it's 4/5. And then we've already seen this is the Shield of Cauldron, which is part of that mega cycle. Going back here, back to the set again, I'm just trying to work out if there's anything that I do want to point out here. Some I've done already, like the Skull Clamps and the Ravagers. We saw Fireball that was in the set. There's also Inflame is in here somewhere, which was reprinted. There was actually, the reason why I bring this up is sometimes in sets, even in the like non-core sets, you do get a number of reprints. So Mirrodin reprinted, so the set before this, Mirrodin set reprinted quite a number of artifact-related staples. There are only 3 that were reprinted in Darksteel, and weren't necessarily artifact-related. So Fireball is 1, Inflame is another, and I don't know. Yeah, that I would suspect that would be in red. So yeah, we did see this before, and also Juggernaut. So first printed in Alpha, and then last seen in Revised. So these are in alphabetical order. So I'll just get down there. Oh, we've got Genesis Chamber. So things keep going past me. I'm thinking, oh yeah, we should take a look at that. In fact, I've shot past it. There we go. There's Juggernaut. So that, just if we're curious, you can see it's been reprinted a few times. There's the original. I think that's the original artwork. Let's go into the view all prints. Yeah, so we've had a few different pieces of artwork. This was quite different in M11. Some of these are obviously promos, of course. But yeah, it's just loads of super interesting artifacts here. Actually, I didn't mention, I know we mentioned it in the other set, I'm not sure in here like how many imprint cards there were. I didn't look actually. We'll have a look in a moment, because that's something else that was in the block, was imprint. In fact, let's do that now. Let's just see. So Oracle. There's only 3. So we got Death Marks, Duplicate, and imprint. If you remember, was you get to remove a certain card from the game, and then it's imprinted on the artifact. So there's a bit more of an explanation in here in terms of what's going on there. So once it's imprinted, then you get to do this. As long as an imprinted creature card has flying, Death Mask duplicate has flying. The same is true of Fear, First Strike, Double Strike, Haste, Land, Walk Protection, and Trample. But with some of these, the nice thing is that you just get these repeatable effects that are triggered in some way. And again, I'll include a link to the set so you can go in and you can do your own slicing through here, because like I said, there's just a ton of stuff just under the artifacts alone. If you come in here, there's obviously loads of really interesting artifacts like Genesis Chamber and Mirror Matrix. An interesting thing like Nish's Tomb. And of course all the equipment as well, like you've got these like Sword of Fire and Ice and Sword of Light and Shadow. So that, yeah, the sword. So there's two, where are we? Let's just do that. So I think it's name. Sword. There we go. Yeah, so a couple of swords. Sword of Fire and Ice. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from red and blue. Whenever a equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, Sword of Fire and Ice deals 2 damage to target creature or player, and you draw a card. Equipped for 2. Sword of Light and Shadow, 3 to cast. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from white and black. So basically they offer different protection for different colours. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage, you gain 3 life, and you may return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So again, whenever they do combat damage, then some effect gets triggered, which is different on the different cards. So most expensive card in the set is Sword of Fire and Ice. Let's go into the full text because it's always interesting to see how many times this has been reprinted. So $54 in as the Darksteel version. Obviously there's other versions including Inventions which are more expensive, not surprisingly. We've got Savage Beating, only ever been printed in Darksteel, $47. Mycosynth Lattice did turn up in Battle Bond, which was a multiplayer set. I think that's right. Or was that the Two-Headed Giant set? Anyway, yeah. I'm having trouble remembering actually, but yeah, it's been reprinted once, so $38. Ether Vial, it's in Darksteel, but it's been reprinted a few times. And of course, Ether Vial was banned in Mirrored in Block tournaments. So at the beginning of upkeep, you may put a charge counter on Ether Vial. You may put a creature card with converted mana cost equal to the number of charge counters on Ether Vial from your hand into play. Wonder why that was banned. Yeah, so in terms of the notable cards in the set, we've got Ether Vial, Arcbound Ravager and Skull Clamp, all of which we've now seen as part of this. Oh, there we go, there's Arcbound Ravager. But we've seen earlier as I've gone through the set. So it's sacrifice an artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on Arcbound Ravager. It's modular 1, and that was also banned in Mirrored in Block. So again, it's Mirrored in Block tournaments because they're at the end of once the final set was released, there was always like Mirrored in Block tournaments available, where of course you only played cards from the Mirrored in Block. Skull Clamp, which we've seen already, is banned in extended format tournaments. So Sword of Light and Shadow, 21. Trinisphere. So as long as it's untapped, each spell that would cost less than 3 mana to play costs 3 mana to play. Printed in one other sort of, you know, regular booster set, I suppose, for want of a better word. Didn't affect the price much. Darksteel Forge, again, turned up in plain chase, but it was reprinted in a Corsair. I remember that actually. Shield of Cauldron, $12. It's also available as a promo. Spellbinder, $11, and Darksteel Colossus, and Memnarch. So Memnarch we just dropped below $9. So only ever been turned up in Arch Enemy, and there's Skull Clamp, which we looked at earlier, and as I mentioned, it's been banned in extended format tournaments. So yeah, and then we move on to Death Global, but below the $10 mark now. In terms of EDH, well, I think we know what we're going to see here. Usual suspects, heavy artifact sets. So we're going to see stuff that, you know, can be played in multiple EDH decks. This is against the EDH rec ranking. Skull Clamp, Whisker Silk Cloak, Darksteel Citadel, Darksteel Ingot, Well of Lost Dreams. Whenever you gain life, you may pay X, where X is less than or equal to the amount of life you gained. If you do draw a card, Sword of Fire and Ice, Darksteel Force, Sword of Light and Shadow, and so on. Geth's Grimoire. Whenever an opponent discards a card from his or hand, you may draw a card. Oh, there we go. Oh, and there's Blinkmark Nexus. So, let's just have a quick look at its prevalence. Obviously good in anything that generates tokens. 15% of their database. Okay, so that's that bit done now, the set musings. On to what the next couple of videos I'm going to do. I'll do a bit of a spoiler now, so turn off at this point. If you've made it through this far. It's been a little bit slow. This happens sometimes with Architect. So there's my card pool. So this is all from Darksteel. So 6 packs of Darksteel. Should be interesting. Theme decks from Darksteel. We have Master Blaster. Where's it gone? Which is this one. Mind Swarm, Swarm and Storm, and Transference. And obviously I'm going to pick one of those to do my Commander Fodder episode, and it was super tempting, and so therefore I picked the, as you can see up here, it's going to be a little slow re-rendering here, does that? Okay, there we go. So it's the Transference, the mono blue Arcbound deck. So I decided, because there's no legend in there, this is going to be, here we go, our commander's going to be Sai, and so I'll go through that in a later episode. So there we have it. Hopefully you enjoyed that episode of Set Musings. I know this is really interesting going through this period in Magic, because if you just got on just before, this was such a different set in terms of, you know, there's just so many artifacts in here, and so it's almost like, you know, forget everything you know about Magic. You just almost got to approach it with a beginner's mind, and you know, go in fresh. It's also an interesting set to look at retrospectively. You know, if you're familiar with other sets, and obviously you might be familiar with, say, Scars of Mirrodin. But again, it's always interesting to see sets where, you know, there's a dominant type in it. So, you know, sets where there's a high percentage of artifacts, or sets where there's a high percentage of creatures, or only creatures, or sets where there's a high percentage of, say, enchantments. And what that does if you're attempting to build a deck, you know, in limited, either through in through 6-packs like sealed, or whether it's draft. And what I find is when you have sets which are heavily biased towards a particular type, that's when I personally see a bigger difference between. I mean, there are obviously there's differences between draft and sealed, but a bigger difference because when and of course this is affected by the rarity, where they are in the rarity, but when you're drafting, it's much easier to construct a build or go towards that particular thing when you've got a wider pick of available cards as stuff's being passed around the table, as opposed to sealed, where it's just like 6-packs, there you go, and you're at the mercy of as you fan the cards out and what you see, what you get in that card pool. And obviously that's going to be very strongly related to the rarity breakdown of the set as a whole, although you're playing a subset. Whereas in draft, you're seeing a lot more cards out of the set, so therefore you can sculpt. That's the word I was looking for. Sculpt your set, and that's always interesting to see how that differentiates in sets where there's a larger proportion of a certain type of card. So there we have it. Thanks again for watching, and bye for now.